It was autumn a decade ago. My boyfriend, who is now my husband, and I decided we needed a break from the noise of the city. We wanted to go camping, but not the family-friendly, paved parking lot RV hookup kind of camping. We wanted to really rough it, primitive camping. We drove deep into the sprawling, suffocating woods of eastern Pennsylvania, searching for total isolation. The place we finally chose for the night barely even existed on a map. Camping was completely free, there was absolutely zero cell service, and the path to get there, well, calling it a road would be a generous compliment. It was just a muddy, washed-out gravel trail, completely swallowed by the dense, gray tree line. We did encounter two other people on our way in. At the time, I tried to brush them off, but looking back, I can't help but wonder if they were the bait. The first was a woman. She had her rusted, beaten-up truck pulled off to the muddy shoulder of the trail. The hood was propped wide open. As our car slowly approached, crawling over the deep ruts in the dirt, I expected her to wave us down. Usually my boyfriend is the first person to pull over and offer a helping hand, but this time, he didn't touch the brakes. He just kept his foot hovering over the gas pedal, his eyes locked on her. "Something is wrong," he whispered, his voice tight with an unease I rarely heard. I looked at the woman out of my passenger window. She didn't look frustrated. She didn't look relieved to see another car. People who are stranded usually look at you with this bright, hopeful desperation, but not her. She just stood there, perfectly still, staring at us with dead, flat eyes. She didn't wave, she didn't speak, she just looked, expectant. Like she already knew we were coming, like she was simply waiting for the trap to snap shut. My boyfriend hit the gas, and we left her behind in the rearview mirror. Eventually, we found a small clearing. It had been raining for days prior, and the woods were a thick, soupy mess of mud and wet leaves. We had driven around for a long time, desperately trying to find the driest site possible to pitch our tent. We were just starting to unpack the trunk, gathering wood to build a fire for hot dogs, when the second encounter happened. I heard it before I saw it, the slow, heavy, wet crunch of tires rolling through the mud. A dark sedan crept past our campsite. It was moving impossibly slow. The driver's side window was rolled completely down, and the man inside, he wasn't looking at the road. His head was turned completely sideways, his eyes locked onto us. He didn't blink, he just watched us, taking inventory of our car, our tent, our faces, until he disappeared around the bend. "Creep," I muttered, trying to laugh it off. But 10 minutes later, the crunching returned. It was the exact same car, the exact same agonizingly slow crawl, the exact same dead, unblinking stare from the driver. My boyfriend froze, dropping the firewood he was holding. We were miles away from the main highway. There was nothing out here. Why was he circling us? Panic started to bubble in my chest. "Should we leave?" I asked, my voice shaking. My boyfriend looked down at the road, his jaw clenched tight. "It won't matter," he replied grimly. "Look at the mud." He was right. The ground was so soft, our tires had carved deep, inescapable trenches into the earth. If we packed up and moved deeper into the woods, all that man had to do was follow the fresh tracks. We were already marked. The watcher didn't come by a third time, so, against our better judgment, we decided to stay. We spent the remaining daylight hours trying to goof off, trying to pretend the heavy, damp air wasn't thick with paranoia. Eventually, the sun sank below the tree line. The woods plunged into an ink-black darkness. We zipped ourselves into our tent, slipping into our sleeping bags, and mercifully, we fell asleep. But whether or not the woman and the watcher were involved, the true nightmare didn't begin until 3 a.m. Have you ever been woken up by a sound so unnatural, so violently aggressive, that your brain simply shorts out from sheer terror? My eyes snapped open in the pitch black. My heart was slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was deafening. I can't even describe it perfectly, but my husband later said it sounded exactly like a heavy caliber chain gun revving up in the darkness. It was this horrific, metallic, scraping roar, like someone had taken a heavy, rusted iron shovel, dragged it violently over a pile of sharp gravel, and played the audio back through a massive, distorted loudspeaker. My boyfriend jolted upright beside me. He scrambled to his knees, pressing his face against the thin mesh window of the tent. He couldn't see anything. The moon was out, casting long, skeletal shadows through the trees, but the clearing was empty. Then the sound repeated. It echoed through the trees, vibrating in my teeth. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even force a whisper out of my throat. I just lay there in the dark, trembling violently. My boyfriend leaned back down, his mouth right next to my ear. "It's okay," he whispered, his breath hot against my cheek. It's probably miles away. Sound travels weirdly out here. Just go back to sleep." I didn't question it. I wanted to believe him so badly that I just squeezed my eyes shut and prayed for daylight. But looking back, I should have realized the terrifying truth. If the sound was miles away, why did he feel the need to whisper? He lied to me. He lied to keep me from screaming. Years later, he confessed that the horrible, metallic grinding sound wasn't miles away at all. It was coming from just down the dark dirt road, right outside our camp. We laid there in the agonizing silence for what felt like hours. Every snapping twig, every rustling leaf, sounded like heavy boots circling our flimsy nylon tent. My mind conjured horrifying images of men standing just inches from my head, waiting for us to unzip the flap. Suddenly, my boyfriend grabbed my arm. His grip was painfully tight. "Get dressed," he ordered, his voice dropping to a deadly, serious whisper. "Do not speak. We are leaving now." The sheer authority in his voice sent a new wave of ice-cold adrenaline flooding through my veins. I scrambled into my jeans, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the button. I watched in absolute horror as my boyfriend reached into his duffel bag and pulled out the large, heavy machete we had bought specifically for this trip. With a sickening rip, he tore the blade out of its thick plastic packaging. He gripped the handle tightly, his knuckles turning white, and unzipped the tent flap. "Stay right behind me," he hissed. We burst out of the tent into the freezing night air. We didn't bother folding anything nicely. We just grabbed the sleeping bags, tore down the poles, and shoved everything into the trunk of the car in a blind, frantic rush. I was frantically scanning the tree line, looking for the watcher, looking for the woman, looking for whoever was making that demonic, grinding noise. The moon provided plenty of pale, ghostly light. I was looking at the ground, searching for footprints in the mud that didn't belong to us, when my eyes locked onto the dead ashes of our campfire. My breath caught in my throat. Sitting there, right on the edge of the blackened stones, was an empty beer can. It caught the moonlight, gleaming faintly against the dark earth. It had not been there when we went to sleep, and worse, we didn't even bring beer on this trip. Someone had been in our camp. Someone had stood right outside our tent while we slept, drinking a beer in the pitch black, listening to us breathe. "Get in the car," my boyfriend yelled, abandoning the rest of our gear. We dove into the front seats, slammed the doors, and locked them instantly. My boyfriend slammed his foot on the accelerator, and our car tore out of the mud, sliding and fishtailing down the treacherous, washed-out road. As we sped away, tearing through the darkness, my boyfriend finally let out a ragged, shaking breath. He looked over at me, his eyes wide with leftover terror. He explained that he hadn't wanted to run from the tent right away, because he was absolutely convinced that the horrific, metallic noise was a trap. A deliberate, terrifying lure designed to panic us, forcing us to run blindly out of our tent and straight into the woods, right into whoever was waiting for us in the dark. He also confessed another horrifying thought. As we were running to the car, he was half expecting to turn the key and hear the engine sputter and die. Out in the deep woods, robbers and killers will often siphon the gas tank of parked cars, leaving their victims completely stranded. But they couldn't have stopped us, because we drove a hybrid. Even as we were shaking, practically sick to our stomachs from the adrenaline and fear, we managed a weak, hysterical laugh. "Imagine that commercial," I choked out, wiping tears from my eyes. Number of brutal, backwoods murders avoided by driving a fuel-efficient hybrid, too. We didn't stop driving until the sun came up. We didn't stop until we saw paved roads, streetlights, and a crowded, brightly lit gas station. For the rest of that trip, we only stayed in well-populated, highly rated campsites, and eventually, we just got a hotel. I don't know who the woman was, I don't know who the watcher was, I don't know what that mechanical, screeching nightmare sound was at 3 a.m., and I definitely don't know who left that empty beer can inches from where we slept. But I do know one thing, I am never going primitive camping again. I was never a park ranger, but for years, I was part of an organization very similar to the Scouts. We spent a massive amount of time deep in the untamed woods. When you spend that much time in the isolated wilderness, weird things are bound to happen. Most of the time, it was easy to explain away. A wandering animal, a strange trick of the moonlight, a distorted shadow. But one night, something happened that, to this day, scares the absolute living shit out of me. I was a group leader for the 8 to 10-year-olds, and we were out on our annual camping trip. It was our very first year staying on this specific plot of terrain. It was huge, unfathomably huge. Usually we leaders tend to explore the majority of the map before the kids even arrive, sweeping for dangerous drops or bad spots to avoid. But this time, it was totally impossible. There was just too much land. Every camp we host a tradition we call the night game. It's essentially a scary, adrenaline-fueled scavenger hunt in the pitch black. The kids have to navigate the woods and complete several tasks at different checkpoints, while we, the leaders, mask up as monsters, hide out in the brush, and scare the ever-loving shit out of them. Obviously, we had planned one during this camp too. While running between my designated checkpoints, I stumbled upon a wide, open stretch of forest. There was very little ground foliage, making it the absolute perfect spot to chase after a group of screaming kids. But because it was so bare, there was almost no room to hide, except directly behind the thick trunks of the trees. I couldn't use my flashlight. If I did, they'd be able to see my beam from miles away, so I stood in the dark. And I mean the unsettling kind of dark, the kind of heavy, suffocating blackness that plays cruel tricks on your eyes, making you imagine shapes that aren't really there. While waiting in the freezing air, I swore I saw a shadow moving. It looked to be around my size, just darting silently past my peripheral vision. I couldn't see it clearly. I just assumed I was imagining things because whenever I quickly flicked my flashlight on, nothing was there. The night dragged on, the game was finally nearing its end, and that's when I saw the shadow again. This time it wasn't running. I could vaguely see it standing perfectly still, right next to a massive tree not too far from my hiding spot. I breathed a sigh of relief. I figured it was just one of the other scout leaders, looking for a place to hide for one final scare. Since it was about time to head back to camp anyway, I decided to walk over. I aimed my heavy flashlight directly at the base of the tree. The bright beam cut through the darkness, and my blood ran freezing cold. There was indeed someone standing there, but it wasn't a co-leader. It was a man, dressed in a filthy, torn-up burlap sack. His head was completely covered. Someone had taken multiple, opaque white plastic grocery bags, pulled them forcefully over his head, and tightly tied them together around his neck. He was entirely barefoot. His exposed arms and legs were caked in a thick layer of crusted, dried mud. His hands, they were drawn up near his chest in this horrid, unnatural, cramped position. I froze. Pure, paralyzing dread washed over my entire body. Something felt so horribly off. I called out, my voice trembling, Is everything okay?" He didn't respond, he didn't even flinch, but then I heard a sound. It was a weird, rhythmic, hollow thud. It sounded exactly like someone knocking their knuckles against solid wood. Still trying to rationalize the horrific situation, I took a few hesitant steps closer, until I was less than 10 meters away from this absolute nightmare. When the beam of my flashlight fully illuminated him, my stomach violently churned. The knocking sound, it wasn't his hands. This strange, mud-covered male was rhythmically, forcefully smacking his plastic-wrapped head directly into the thick bark of the tree, over and over and over again. My brain was desperately trying to deny what I was seeing. Convinced this was just a deeply twisted prank by the other counselors, I shouted at him to knock it off. He stopped, the knocking ceased, very, very slowly. He rotated his plastic-wrapped head toward me, and then he started walking directly towards me. Every single primal instinct inside my brain violently screamed at me to run. It didn't matter if it was just a stupid prank. It didn't matter if my friends would laugh at me later. The aura radiating off this man felt like pure, unadulterated danger. I turned on my heel and I ran. I sprinted as fast as my legs could physically carry me, tearing blindly through the heavy brush. The second I bolted, I heard the heavy, slapping thuds of his bare feet running after me. I didn't dare look back. If I turned around, I knew I would trip and slam into a tree, and I knew, without a doubt, if he caught me, I wouldn't make it out. My lungs were burning by the time I finally burst into the clearing of our main campsite. I collapsed, frantically scanning the faces around the fire. Every single leader, every person who could have possibly been dressed in that burlap sack, was already there. There was no physical way anyone could have sprinted back before me, and they sure as hell didn't have the time to change into their regular, perfectly clean clothes. Still panting, I told them what happened, accusing them of giving me a good scare. They just looked weirdly at me. They genuinely thought I was trying to scare them with a ghost story. We left it at that. But I couldn't let it go. The next day, as the sun flooded the woods, I convinced someone else to walk back out there with me. Who knows, maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and was out there dying of hypothermia. We hiked back through the endless trees. Eventually, we found the exact tree where I saw the person banging his head. The man was gone. But right at eye level, violently nailed directly into the thick bark of the tree, was a dead, completely skinned, decomposing rabbit. We immediately called the cops. They hiked out, took one quick glance around, and lazily brushed it off. Probably just a dumb prank from a rival scouting group, they chuckled, or some kids from the nearby town. They left without doing a single thing. We didn't notice anything weird after that, so maybe it really was just a dumb prank. But seriously, if that was a joke, someone out there has a dangerously fucked up sense of humor. A convoy of us campers and fishermen were making the long, treacherous drive down the dirt road from Mogollon, heading towards Snow Lake. This wasn't a paved, tourist-friendly highway. It was a rugged, loose rock path surrounded by steep, dizzying drops. About halfway into our journey, our convoy was forced to a halt. Up ahead, we spotted a uniformed forest ranger. His truck was pulled over, and he was staring down into a deep, steep ditch just off the shoulder of the road. We hopped out to investigate. Turns out, some idiot driver had tried to make a U-turn on the narrow ridge. They didn't realize how slippery the loose rock was, and they went right over the edge, high-centering their vehicle on the precipice. One wrong move and the car would have tumbled down into the canyon. We were miles away from the nearest official campground. There was no cell service, no tow trucks coming. So we got to work. We maneuvered one of our Jeeps into position, hooked up a heavy-duty winch, and started the slow, grinding process of pulling the terrified driver out of the ditch. It was loud, the winch was screaming, the rocks were crunching, the engine was roaring. But then someone tapped me on the shoulder and pointed up towards the completely barren hill beside us. Descending from the steep, jagged rocks was a man. Instantly, my brain completely short-circuited. Out here, you expect to see hikers draped in Gore-Tex, heavy boots, and survival gear. But this man... He was a painfully skinny, gaunt white dude with straggly blonde hair. He was carrying a wooden walking stick, wearing a black fanny pack, and a bright purple, crushed velvet sweatsuit. Yes, you heard that correctly, a matching purple velvet sweatsuit. It looked like a cheap 1970s Halloween pimp costume. He slid down the loose rocks and casually walked right up to our group. He looked somewhat like the actor Rhys Ifans, tall and lanky, but there was something deeply, fundamentally wrong with him. He was smiling, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was this massive, unblinking, ear-to-ear grin. It looked like his facial muscles were locked into an absolute, unnatural expression of pure joy. "Hello," he chirped, his voice strangely upbeat. He told us he was German and that he was out here just having a great time. At first, a few of the guys in our convoy started to chuckle. We could not get over the purple velvet suit. It was absurd, it was hilarious, but the forest ranger wasn't laughing. The ranger stepped forward, his hand resting cautiously near his radio. He looked terrified. He immediately started interrogating the man. "Where are you staying?" the ranger demanded. "Where did you come from?" You see, it was exactly 9 a.m. To be walking down from that specific, isolated hill at 9 in the morning meant he would have had to hike for hours, plural. He would have had to be walking through the pitch-black wilderness, over jagged rocks and deadly drops in the dead of the freezing night, wearing nothing but thin, purple velvet. The German man didn't drop his massive, unnatural smile. He just giggled, a goofy, hollow sound, and raised a pale finger. He pointed off toward a massive, distant mountain range on the horizon. The realization hit our group like a bucket of ice water. The laughter died in our throats. We stared at him. He had no backpack. He had no survival gear. "Where is your water?" one of my friends asked, his voice shaking. The sun was already starting to bake the earth. Without water at this altitude, your organs will start shutting down in hours. The man just shook his head, his smile never wavering. He aggressively refused any of our water. He refused our food. He refused a ride. Without saying another word, the man in the purple velvet suit turned around, crossed the dirt road, and casually stepped off the edge of the trail, plunging directly into the dense, trackless woods. We stood there in absolute silence, watching the purple fabric disappear into the brush. The ranger looked sick to his stomach. I can't legally detain him," the ranger muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "He seems completely coherent, but I'll check the campsites in that direction later. He won't make it out there." We eventually freed the trapped car, and our convoy quietly continued on to Snow Lake. The mood was completely ruined. We commenced drinking like fish, trying to drown out the deeply unsettling feeling that we had just spoken to a ghost, or something pretending to be human. That evening, as the sun went down and the freezing dark crept into our camp, the ranger popped by our fire. He looked exhausted. He told us that he had spent the entire day searching. He had radioed every single outpost in the Gila wilderness. Nobody at any other camp had seen the man. There were no abandoned vehicles found at any trailheads. There were no missing persons reported, and absolutely no one had seen a skinny, blonde German man wearing a purple velvet sweatsuit. The next morning, that ranger rolled off duty. His replacement drove all the way up to our camp just to ask us about the report. The new ranger thought his coworker had lost his mind or was smoking something we gave him. "We swear to God," I told him, "it happened," shivering in the morning air. We never heard another word about the man in the purple suit. He was never found dead. He was never found alive. He simply walked into the deadliest part of the wilderness, completely unbothered, perfectly happy, and vanished off the face of the earth. I still think about that ear-to-ear smile. Out there in the dark, what was he smiling at?